All right, so you checked out the review videos and you're ready to try some sample problems. It's great. Um, so first, let's just look at these two problems and decide, are we using the Pythagorean theorem? Are we using the trig functions? Or are we using the inverse trig functions? So remember that if it's Pythagorean theorem, then we've got two sides of a right triangle and we're looking for a third. If it's the regular trig functions, then we have an angle and one side, and we're looking for another side. And then our third option is that it's inverse trig problem, which means that we are looking for an angle. So if we look at this problem, the question mark is on an angle. So since we're looking for an angle, that means we're going to be using one of the inverse trig functions. So now we need to figure out which of the inverse trig functions are we going to use. If we look at this angle, we need to identify these two sides as either opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse. So let's first find the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is the one across from 90 degrees. So if we draw a line straight across here, this is our hypotenuse. Not super helpful for us because that's not one of the two numbers that we're given. Now the opposite side of our triangle is going to be the one across from the angle that we're dealing with. So that's this one. And then our last side here is the adjacent side. So if we look at the two sides that we're given the opposite side and we're given the adjacent side. So our trig function and inverse trig function that deal with that are tangent and inverse tangent. So we know we're going to be using inverse tangent for this. Now remember that what goes into the inverse tangent, inverse sine, and inverse cosine functions is the ratio of two side lengths. In this case, since we're dealing with inverse tangent, we're looking for the ratio of the opposite side length to the adjacent side length. So that means that we're going to do 20 over 33 here. And this is actually equal to the angle that we're looking for. So now that we've got this, all we have to do is put that into the calculator. And when we put this into our calculator, we are going to get that the tangent, or the inverse tangent of 20 over 33 is equal to 31.22. All right, so our units for this is degrees, because we've got 31.22 degrees. Okay, let's look at the second problem. First things first, we are going to identify the sides. Over here, we've got the hypotenuse. Okay, this side, the other one that we're dealing with, is the one across from our angle, so that makes it the opposite side. So now I'm dealing with the opposite and the hypotenuse. So the trig function that deals with the ratio of the opposite length and the length of the hypotenuse is the sine function. So since we're looking for the angle, we're going to use the inverse sine function. And the ratio that we're going to put in there is opposite over hypotenuse, 55 over 58. And you can put that into your calculator, and you should get 71.49. So notice I rounded it. Generally, whenever we're doing these, 1 or 2 decimal places is fine. And if you think about actual measurements that you're doing, with a ruler or something like that, you usually can't get much more accurate than this. But you should always, round to whatever accuracy or precision is asked for. Okay, so that's two examples of using the inverse trig functions.